This is Physics Lab number 3, Evolution of the Eye by Emma Dittmar, Adam Lyons, and Brianna Martinez. How do we see light? The ability to see light is actually a very complex process that involves integrating the explanations of 3 different perspectives, those being the physical, physiological, and psychological processes. Our focus was on the physical level, and how that may have shaped how we evolved to see light at the physiological level. Next, we have our lab setup. First, we have a flashlight as a source of light. Next, light travels through combinations of the 3 filters, red, green, and blue. Then, the light travels through the tank of water to get to the fiber optic cable and spectrometer. We also use sunglasses and lasers to view other relationships with light. As for assumptions, we assumed that the reason red had a higher intensity than other wavelengths was due to heat generated from the light source. We also assumed that the integration time on the spectrometer software yielded the same scale of intensities across trials to make accurate comparisons. Based on preliminary tests, we noticed that the wavelengths that we do not see is the wavelength that is absorbed by an object. We can see this in the graphs below. Light with a green filter had very low intensities for wavelengths that don't correspond to green. Wavelengths with the highest intensity correspond to the color observed. We can also see this in the graphs below. The wavelengths for green had the highest peak when the green filter was used. This was consistent with other colored filters that we used. To see color, our eyes have cone photoreceptors. There are 3 different types of cone photoreceptors, each sensitive to a different wavelength of light: blue, green, and red. When a specific wavelength of light hits the photoreceptor, it causes a chain reaction that results in a signal being sent to the brain. Our question is, why did our eyes evolve these cone photoreceptors that are sensitive to these specific wavelengths of light? For a starting model, we have Beer's law, which says, as light travels through a medium, some of it is absorbed. This means different wavelengths will be absorbed differently when light passes through water. Using Beer's law, we understand that the further light travels through a medium, the more it is absorbed. Beer's law states that the absorbance is proportional to the absorptivity coefficient, path length, and analyte concentration. Finally, we have our results. We found that the measured intensity of infrared and ultraviolet light is less when light passes through water compared to air. We can see that in the 4 spectrometer graphs shown. Ultraviolet light from a purple laser had a higher intensity when measured through air versus water. Infrared light behaved the same way when the 3 filters were used to cancel out visible light. We can tell using Beer's law that these wavelengths are absorbed by the water. Beer's law also tells us that water's absorption coefficient for visible light is low, meaning that visible light travels through water efficiently. Our conclusion is that our evolutionary ancestors lived in water. They were not exposed to much infrared and ultraviolet light because those wavelengths are absorbed by water easily. Human eyes developed cone photoreceptors that are sensitive to visible light because visible light was the most readily available range of light to our ancestors. Visible light has the highest irradiance in the solar spectrum. Life on Earth uses the visible light spectrum because it is the most available through different mediums.